I don't think it will surprise any of you after learning from this morning's bat mitzvah that Brooke is a lover of literature and a gifted writer. Brooke, my father would have loved meeting you and learning from you. He was an English teacher, which meant that reading and writing were highly valued in our home. And of course, so were the rules of grammar. "Can I please have seconds?" at the dinner table resulted in a reminder to use "may I" before receiving another portion of roast beef. I am certain, though, that if my father were alive today and I said, in describing a visit with a non-binary friend, "I saw my friend Mel today. They and I had such a lovely visit," that he would not have corrected me. I know he would not have corrected my use of "they" for an individual, because my father, who loved humanity even more than he loved language or literature, would not want anyone to feel pain or experience marginalization for the sake of grammar. I'm sure it would take him, as it is taking me, some time to get used to this linguistic change, which feels technically incorrect. But he would want non-binary individuals, friends, family, neighbors, strangers, adults, and children, to feel seen. I know this because in our home, proper grammar was a virtue, but compassion and respect were sacred. Spoken languages are constantly evolving. How we speak reflects how we think. Changing our use of language is a challenge, but expanding our understanding of gender is where the real work lies. It's hard to question what we've taken for granted. But after we do, we usually forget how difficult the change was to make. For example, this year celebrates the 50th anniversary of women in the rabbinate. Only decades ago, people wouldn't have used the word rabbi or cantor to describe me or Rabbi Ehrlich or Cantor Anderson or our rabbinic intern Emma Dubin. Today, with all women clergy on the bima and a bat mitzvah, addressing Jewish women clergy by these titles is second nature to most. After all these centuries of it not being used, it only took decades for it to feel right. As our understanding of the word evolves, our language adjusts to our new realities. Interestingly, though, we sometimes think something is a radical break with tradition, only to discover we are returning to an ancient notion. Consider Judaism's most fundamental teaching. There is one God. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, God is one. And yet, in Hebrew, God is Elohim, and Elohim is a plural word. God is a they. That grammatical disagreement feels perfectly comfortable to Jews, both Hebrew speakers and non-Hebrew speakers alike. It shows that we can get used to things that don't necessarily comply with the rules. To go a step further, referring to the one God in the plural speaks to a profound truth in the way that Jews understand God. God is one. That is absolute. But there are so many ways we have understood God and continue to understand God. It makes sense that God's name would be in the plural. When I sit with others and we share our perceptions of God, usually our agreement is what God is not. A male figure in the heavens with a long white beard who decides who will be stricken and who will be saved. Once we let go of that picture of God who sits in the clouds or thunders from the heavens, we open ourselves to an enormous array of possibilities. We can find God in the beauty and intricacy of a changing leaf, or we can experience God in the kindness of someone reaching out to us just at the right moment. Perhaps we discover God in a talent or a gift that feels as natural as our senses, like the way we sing or how we write a poem. We may feel God's presence when we discover a scientific truth, or when we read a brilliant piece of literature, or connect with a work of art. God, like an individual who does not fit into a limiting label, is open to constant discovery and rediscovery. The Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, contains dozens of names and epithets for God. God is described by an enormous variety of characteristics, reflecting the number of ways that the earliest Jews understood God. Those perceptions continued to grow throughout the span of history. Even among the greatest modern theologians, there is a multiplicity of ways to understand God. Buber experienced God in the bonds of relationships. Heschel's path to God is awe. Kaplan finds God in the process leading to goodness and self-fulfillment. This theological and grammatical contradiction, one God who was referred in the plural, greets us in the very beginning of the Torah. As Brooke so beautifully chanted, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. As Elohim, plural, as God began creating the heavens and the earth. Several verses later, we are signaled to also approach humanity through a wide lens. We read that on the sixth day, God created Adam, the first person. Listen to the text. Vayivra Elohim et ha'adam b'tzalmo b'tzelom Elohim bara oto, zachar v'nekeva bara otam. And Elohim, God, created Adam in the divine image. In God's image was the first person created. Male and female, God created them. Listen to the disagreement. The first person was created. Male and female, God created them. Now let's make sure we take in two main features of this verse. First and foremost, humanity is sacred. We are created, B'Tselem Elohim, in the divine image. This is most important and underscores the lessons of compassion that I learned from my parents. Every person carries a divine spark. Every person is of boundless worth. Every person is deserving of respect and needs to be seen. Second, this first person, a singular identity, is referred to as both male and female, a multiplicity in Hebrew, otam, they. Now, we can't know exactly what the authors of this text meant, or what the earliest listeners of this text took from its wording. We do know that mainstream Jewish, Christian, and secular interpretation of this text presents the binary we have grown up with. Humanity was created, zachar, male, nekeva, female, as two distinct genders. However, there is a midrash, a 2,000-year-old interpretive text that turns our assumption of this binary on its head. Now keep in mind that every passage of midrash contains multiple opinions and insights, all stemming from the same word or phrase. A midrash on this verse describing the creation of humanity explains that the first human being was half male and half female, and later split into two separate beings. In the same midrash, other sages say that the first person was created as an androgynous being with a mixture of gender, a spectrum referred to as otam, them. Returning to the Torah verse, if we embrace the ancient rabbinic idea that the first person was created with two genders, or as a blend of genders, and we also embrace that the first person was created in God's image, that reinforces what we know from our sacred literature, that God is described in an enormous variety of ways, reflecting all genders. God is a multiplicity, and so are we. The Jewish mystics explicitly describe God with masculine and feminine names and attributes. And if we look at just some of our high holiday prayers, we will find Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, and El Rachum V'Chanun. Rachum meaning compassionate comes from Rechem meaning womb. God is gender encompassing, as is humanity, created in God's divine image. It can be hard to take all this in. Our brains, even younger ones, are biologically wired to binary thinking. This dates back to our earliest existence. Big and little, fair and unfair, allowed and forbidden, chocolate and vanilla. As a young child, when I would watch TV with my 4 older brothers, it was usually Star Trek or Planet of the Apes. My first question was always, is he a good guy or a bad guy? Binary thinking is a way of organizing a complex world. But eventually we realize the limitations and mistruths about that way of binary thinking. When I was 9, my father and I were watching the movie Les Miserables. Now keep in mind this was long before the singing and dancing version. I'm talking about the black and white original. And I was looking at it through black and white vision. In contemplating the policeman Javert hunting down Jean Valjean, an escapee from prison, I was disturbed by what I saw as a breach of justice. He broke the law, he should be in jail. My father was equally disturbed by my reaction. He stole, yes, but he needed bread for his family, my father said to me. They were starving. And, he pointed out, the priest offered forgiveness, so why couldn't the court? We might be nervous by the push to embrace a non-binary understanding of gender. But what I find far more frightening is the binary thinking that has pervaded our minds as individuals and our society as a whole. Republican, Democrat, right, wrong, good, bad, Zionist, anti-Zionist. Binary thinking, this or that, with or against, is the real danger we face. Yes, we need discernment and boundaries, and some things are absolutely right or wrong, just or unjust. But seeing the world through a binary lens has contributed to the great separation many of us feel from others, even our own friends and family, our own congregants. And the intolerance and detachment that pervades our family dinners and the public square. It is causing us to create greater distances instead of coming closer. This kind of binary thinking is holding us back from moving forward toward a fuller, more whole world. It's keeping us from seeing each other as sacred beings, from meeting in the many places where we might find connection. It makes sense that we crave clarity, that we yearn to reduce the chaos in our minds and in our world. It gives us a sense of control. But as my friend and teacher, Rabbi Amy Schwartzman says, they and Elohim and so much more show us that when we fall back on binary thinking too often, we fail to engage with the complexities of our world. We leave people out. We miss a spectrum of ideas. We lose nuance. The fertile middle ground becomes invisible. People created in God's image become invisible. I hope we will all work to follow the teachings of our earliest texts in embracing the singular they in our language and also in the many dimensions of our lives. Yes, this kind of change, like so many other changes, can be confusing, can be uncomfortable, but broadening our way of understanding God, by broadening our way of understanding gender, by broadening our way of understanding each other and ourselves and the world, all of that opens us to creativity, to possibility, to compassion, and to connection. At the moment of creation, by not clearly defining Adam, humanity, us, Elohim, the multiplicity that is God, endowed us with infinite possibilities of identity and growth. Like God, each of us is a sacred, singular they. At any given moment, we hold a wide spectrum of beliefs. Our ideas are always changing. We are constantly evolving. However we might define our gender, by our very nature, as creations of God, we are not binary creatures. May we all continue to discover the Elohim within us and within each other. Amen.